The sun rises over the Colosseum, painting its stone arches gold. But beneath that beauty lies something darker. Yesterday's blood still stains the sand. Down below, merchants shout over baskets of olives and cheap wine. Behind locked gates, starving lions pace, their ribs showing through matted fur. Elephants stomp in fury. Panthers claw at iron bars. From the tunnels comes the ring of steel, swords being sharpened for the killing ahead. Then the crowd arrives. Tens of thousands of Romans flood through the gates, hungry for what their empire does better than anyone else, turning death into a show. This wasn't just entertainment. It was how Rome kept control, how emperors proved their power, how the people learned to cheer for cruelty. Today, we're diving into the darkest moments of Roman arena history. The acts so brutal, they shocked even the Romans themselves. From blood-soaked funeral rites to prisoners forced to die as living theatre, we'll uncover how an empire built its glory on human suffering. Before we begin, make sure to join Echoes of History so you never miss our journey through the shadows of the past. Now take your seat. The gates are opening. The first gladiator fights didn't start with emperors or glory. They started at a funeral. In 264 BC, 3 sons wanted to honor their dead father, but they didn't build statues or say prayers. They armed 6 slaves and made them fight to the death in a cattle market. This wasn't a game. It was duty, a blood sacrifice owed to the dead. The tradition came from Rome's enemies. In Campania, warriors were killed at gravesides to calm angry spirits. The Samnites, fierce opponents of Rome, held combat contests at burials. Roman nobles saw this and loved it. Why show wealth with gold when you could prove power with blood? But funerals were just the beginning. Soon, Rome's leaders realized these fights could do more than honor the dead. They could control the living. Religious festivals began featuring gladiators. The Senate called it holy duty, but everyone knew the truth. State-approved violence to keep people loyal and obedient. Even the armor told stories of conquest. Early fighters wore the equipment of defeated enemies. The Samnite with his heavy shield, the Thracian with his curved blade, the Gaul with his broadsword. Watching them bleed was watching Rome's victories replayed, cut by cut, death by death. Blood became propaganda. Temporary wooden stands gave way to massive stone amphitheaters. The games no longer belonged to grieving families. They belonged to the state, to the empire itself. Each drop of blood carried the same message. Rome controls everything, even death itself. What started as ritual slowly became obsession, and once that door opened, Rome never closed it again. The crowd didn't just roar for men. Sometimes the loudest cheers came for animals dragged from the farthest corners of the known world. Lions from North Africa, leopards from the Caucasus, crocodiles from the Nile, even giraffes hauled across burning deserts. They weren't displayed as wonders. They were brought to die. Romans called these events venations, hunts, but they had nothing to do with real hunting. This was domination, proof that the empire could capture the wild and destroy it for pleasure. Julius Caesar started the trend in 46 BC by parading the first giraffe ever seen in Europe. Romans called it a camelopardalis, half camel, half leopard, because they had no word for it. Then they threw it into the arena to be torn apart. The message was clear. If Rome could seize the strangest creatures alive, it could conquer anything. The slaughter grew worse. When the Colosseum opened in AD 80, Emperor Titus reportedly killed more than 9,000 animals in a single celebration. Archaeologists have found bones marked by deliberate starvation. Lions and bears were weakened beforehand to guarantee quick, bloody kills. Even elephants, once feared by Roman armies under Hannibal, were herded in and butchered for cheers. Behind the scenes, the logistics were staggering. Exotic creatures had to be trapped, transported across deserts, and kept barely alive just long enough to die in front of 50,000 screaming spectators. Caravans dragged cages through scorching heat. Ships carried them down the Nile. Handlers risked their lives delivering living trophies to Rome. Every creature was proof of the empire's endless reach. Some emperors turned these hunts into personal stages. Commodus, Rome's showman emperor, dressed as Hercules and slaughtered hundreds of animals himself. He wanted to look like a god among beasts. But everyone saw the truth, a fragile ego with a bow. The hunts were rigged, animals were chained, wounded or starved, so the emperor could claim easy victory. And the crowd cheered because staying silent could be fatal. Ancient writers like Pliny the Elder warned that rare species were vanishing after decades of Roman slaughter. Lions, leopards, elephants pushed toward extinction to feed the empire's hunger for spectacle. The Colosseum wasn't just a theater of death, it was an ecological disaster. But Rome didn't care about extinction. What mattered was showing that nature itself could be captured, starved, and destroyed for entertainment. When you imagine gladiators, you might picture two evenly matched warriors in noble combat. The truth was far uglier. Rome thrived on unfairness, on fights designed for cruelty, not honor. They invented bizarre weapons, created absurd rules, and staged matches no one could truly win. Some victims weren't fighters at all. Prisoners and condemned criminals were shoved into the arena dressed like fools, given wooden swords, and sent to die against trained killers. The crowd jeered as the helpless stumbled and fell. Public execution disguised as sport. Even the weapons became characters. The retiarius fought with a fisherman's net and trident against the secutor, whose smooth helmet was designed to deflect the net. It wasn't about pure skill. It was about suspense, watching to see if the net would catch or the sword would strike first. Romans devoured that tension even when the outcome was scripted like a play. The numbers grew obscene. Sometimes one gladiator faced multiple opponents. Other times, entire groups clashed like miniature armies, turning the sand into a swamp of blood and broken bodies. When novelty faded, they reached further. Female gladiators appeared in the 1st century AD. Writers like Juvenal mocked them, but records prove they fought for real, against dwarfs, against beasts, against each other. Their presence didn't challenge gender roles. It proved that no one, man or woman, was beyond Rome's hunger for spectacle. Even helmets became tools of torture. Some narrowed vision or muffled sound, forcing fighters to stumble half-blind while the audience laughed. Others were so heavy that simply lifting your head became a struggle. Armor wasn't always protection. Sometimes it was punishment. Then came propaganda disguised as combat. Gladiators dressed as barbarians, forced to play Rome's defeated enemies. Their inevitable defeat reminded everyone that the empire always won. Every mismatch, every strange twist, every gender-bending stunt was carefully designed to keep crowds shocked, loyal, and begging for more. The Colosseum never settled for routine. It constantly invented new cruelties, always hunting for the next thrill to feed Rome's endless appetite. By midday, after the morning fights had soaked the sand and the crowd grew restless, the arena changed. Combat gave way to theater, but theater where death was absolutely real. Romans called it damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. For the condemned, it wasn't a trial. It was a script they couldn't refuse. Criminals, deserters, rebellious slaves, prisoners of war. They all became unwilling actors in executions disguised as mythology. Each victim's punishment matched their crime. Thieves torn apart by wolves, arsonists burned alive, traitors thrown to lions. Every scene was a morality play written in blood. The scale could stagger belief. During Emperor Trajan's celebrations after conquering Dacia, thousands of captives were slaughtered over 103 relentless days. It wasn't random chaos. It was organized like acts in a grim play, paced to keep the audience on edge until the next horror arrived. Animals starred in this nightmare. Lions were starved to frenzy before release. Bears chained in pits were goaded into sudden rage. Even prize leopards were unleashed on trembling victims. The uncertainty would the beast strike fast or toy with his prey kept the stands howling. Sometimes the cruelty came dressed as legend. Prisoners were forced to play doomed heroes. Orpheus torn apart by wild animals instead of charming them. Prometheus chained while vultures circled. These weren't stories anymore. They were blood-soaked performances with real corpses. Death in Rome wasn't just death, it was theater mocking and brutal. For the condemned, dying wasn't enough. They had to perform their demise, acting out myths with their own flesh. Executions became grotesque plays where bodies replaced masks, and every script ended in agony. The cruelty stretched beyond beasts. Crucifixion, borrowed from the East, was staged right in the arena. Men and women nailed to timber, while vendors sold wine nearby and children played. Fire joined the spectacle. Prisoners were forced into the tunica molesta, a shirt soaked in pitch, then set ablaze, human torches writhing as smoke curled skyward. As Tertullian bitterly wrote, they became living flames. These killings weren't just dark entertainment, they were propaganda, warnings carved into living flesh. Defy Rome, and you would die slowly with tens of thousands watching. Not everyone could stomach it. Seneca complained that midday executions hardened the soul, making people crueler. But his protest drowned in the thunder of a crowd that came not for justice, but for the thrill of punishment. Rome's imagination didn't stop with sand and steel. Sometimes emperors demanded oceans inside the city. Mock naval battles called naumachie were spectacles on an insane scale, where water itself became a weapon. Julius Caesar set the precedent in 46 BC, digging an enormous basin near the Tiber, filling it with water and real ships. Thousands of doomed captives were forced aboard and told to fight as rival fleets. They weren't actors. They were men condemned to die for applause. Arrows, catapults, and swords turned the basin into a floating slaughterhouse. Augustus expanded the madness. In Suta BC, he created a basin almost 2,000 by 1,200 Roman feet, fed by a custom aqueduct just to keep it full. 30 warships clashed there, each crammed with prisoners fated never to leave alive. The message: Rome could command seas where none existed. Even nature bent to imperial whim. By 52 AD, Claudius went further, draining Lake Fucine to stage another naumachia. When the captives greeted him with the chilling salute, "Morituri te salutant." Those who are about to die salute you. History gained one of its most haunting lines. Whether rehearsed or desperate, it captured the hopelessness of men turned into props. Fire, too, had its macabre myths. Victims wearing pitch-soaked tunics were cast as heroes, meeting fiery fates. Hercules consumed by poison, or Mucius Scaevola testing loyalty by holding his hand to flames. The crowd laughed as these heroes screamed, their courage reduced to ash, their stories turned to mockery. Even the Colosseum's architecture fed Rome's appetite for domination. Under Titus and later Domitian, engineers built channels beneath the arena, allowing the sand to flood for smaller naval shows, then drain for combat the next day. Cruelty became an engineering project. Water, fire, flesh. Everything was a prop in Rome's theater of control. To drown captives, to turn bodies into living torches, to bend myths into slaughter. That was power. The emperors weren't satisfied ruling people. They posed as rulers of the elements themselves, gods who commanded not just armies, but reality itself. The line between rule and raw obsession blurred until an emperor's whim decided who lived, who died, and how. Caligula, infamous for savage moods, once ran out of animals mid-show and casually ordered spectators dragged from the stands to fill the gap. They came to watch bloodshed, only to become part of it. Nero, addicted to his own image, treated the arena as a personal stage. Prisoners were dressed as tragic heroes from plays, then executed in ways that mirrored their scripted fates. Nero called it art. Rome whispered madness. Then came Commodus, the ultimate showman emperor. Cloaked as Hercules, he stormed into the Colosseum with club and bow, slaughtering hundreds of animals crippled beforehand to guarantee applause. He even bled the treasury dry paying for his performances, forcing cheers from a terrified crowd. Not satisfied, he faced gladiators too, but only with every advantage rigged in his favor. Losing was impossible. Clapping was compulsory. Domitian wielded the arena like a weapon of paranoia, staging midnight hunts by torchlight to keep Rome uneasy, never sure when amusement might turn to terror. Even good emperors weren't immune. Trajan, remembered as just and capable, marked victory with 123 days of games. Thousands of deaths folded into a celebration of power. Spectacle fed egos, but it carried a price. Caligula and Commodus both died violently, remembered not for leadership, but for theatre written in blood. Not every Roman cheered. Philosophers, poets, early Christians left a quieter record, one that saw rot beneath the marble. Seneca confessed the midday executions hardened him, stripping away empathy rather than building character. Violence, he warned, seeped past arena walls, poisoning daily life. Cicero, decades before, praised bravery yet condemned cruelty for its own sake, though even he admitted the mob demanded games as proof of generosity. To govern meant feeding the beast. For Christians, the amphitheater was both persecution and proof. Those who refused to abandon their faith were thrown to lions or burned alive, their deaths twisted into mass entertainment. Tertullian called the shows seeds of cruelty, condemning an empire that cheered injustice as sport. Economically, the games devoured fortunes. By late empire, rulers bankrupted themselves chasing spectacles grand enough to outshine predecessors. What once displayed strength became desperate performance. Culturally, the appetite dulled Rome's edge. Citizens who once honored discipline now demanded cheap bread and endless circuses. Juvenal mocked this hunger with panem et circenses. To him, the craving for spectacle betrayed how far Rome had drifted from its roots. As frontiers cracked and funds dried up, the arenas crumbled. By the 5th century, the Colosseum, still massive, stood hollow, its sand silent, its roars gone. But the moral questions never faded. Could a society that trained people to revel in suffering truly endure? History's verdict suggests otherwise. Today, the Colosseum looms, scarred but standing. Walk its tunnels, and you might still hear echoes. Iron clashing, beasts roaring, 50,000 voices rising as one. The stone is easy to admire. Harder and more honest is to remember its purpose. Cruelty rehearsed until it felt normal. Rome's arenas weren't merely about blood. They were about control, shaping how citizens thought, laughed, and obeyed. Every hunt, every execution, every myth reborn in screams served the same end: to make power look eternal. And that is the warning carved into the ruins. A civilization that glorifies violence eventually crumbles beneath its own applause. The Colosseum stands as both monument and cautionary tale, a reminder that empires built on spectacle and suffering cannot last forever. The games began at a funeral and ended with an empire's fall. From 3 pairs of slaves fighting in a cattle market to 9,000 animals slaughtered in a day, Rome's appetite for blood grew until it consumed everything. The wooden stands became stone amphitheaters. The funeral rites became state policy. The honor became addiction. What made Rome's arena culture so dangerous wasn't just the violence itself. It was how normal it became. Families brought children. Vendors sold snacks. People laughed and ate while humans burned alive. The empire trained its citizens to see cruelty as entertainment, suffering as spectacle, and death as just another show. The Colosseum may be quiet now, but its lessons echo through time. When a society stops seeing others as human, when power demands constant proof through pain, when entertainment requires real blood, the end is already written in the sand. So which of these horrors reveals Rome's darkest soul? The starved beasts, the living torches, the emperors drunk on their own shows? Share your thoughts below. And if this journey through Rome's brutal past gripped you, join Echoes of History so you never miss our next exploration into the shadows of history. Until then, remember, the Colosseum may stand silent, but its warnings still breathe through every stone.